If I could haul that asteroid into court, I could convict it.
Okay.
For sure, of mass murder. And we found a huge, huge femur, the thigh bone. It was 7 feet 1 inch long, or 2.2 meters.
I mean, you couldn't anticipate that you were going to change the way we see dinosaurs.
They'd still be here today if it wasn't for that cosmic accident.
Life always finds a way, you know, and you kind of wonder, like, when our time's up, who will be next? Is it Kenneth or Ken? What do you prefer?
I go by Kenneth, usually.
Kenneth is cool. And an American paleontologist, geologist, professor, executive founding director of Edelman Fossil Park and Museum, Rowan University. First of all, thank you so much for coming in. And I have been hooked on the dinosaur thing probably, I would say, since I first started reading books. My first book, now they looked a lot different when I was younger. Brontosaurus's tail was on the ground.
That's right.
Now it's come so far in a lifetime. Were you always, from the time you can remember, into the fascination which is dinosaurs?
I was one of those kids like you, and so many kids are, right?
Yeah, it really is, and it's nice. You don't see it as much now, but it's starting to make a comeback. You know, I think the de-extinction stuff has kind of got people's going. Of course, you know, the Jurassic Park movies of I always think, whether accurate or not, they do inspire the imagination.
They do. There's a whole generation of paleontologists a little younger than I am whose origin story is that first Jurassic Park movie.
Which was epic. For me, I think it was because it was books. And then of course, I guess the closest thing we had was Godzilla. But then you would have the movies, and it was like very like animatronic. And the dinosaurs were always one-dimensional. And there's always the bad guys. But for me, it was just the unknown. And I had a little fossil experience when I was around 11 years old. Me and my buddy, I lived in California at the time, and we lived in Sunland, Tahunga, where there was the wash, and there was all these like mountains and hills. And there was a field next to his house that was just this open field, and we decided we were digging. I think we were digging for a fort. We were trying to make a foxhole or something like that, and we found clams.
Yeah.
Big clams.
Yeah.
And we thought, this, you know, we were so far from the ocean or whatever, but we were like, we found fossils and we were going to be millionaires. And
you did. They were not too old fossils, but they're fossils.
Yeah. But the imagination of it, you know, I just remember we had a box full of them, and we were trying to decide, you know, which museum we were going to sell them to. And of course, life has a way of studying them. We'll be happy to take them, but we don't buy them. But that was, but it always is, as life has gone on, it's always something that has been amazing with all the discoveries too. I mean, every week it seems like we're learning something new.
It's true.
And I wasn't too surprised about the feather thing. I think in college I kind of started thinking that birds were, I mean, you look at the skeletal stuff, you know, and it's like it's a pretty hard argument not to make that to say their descendants is one thing, but there are dinosaurs. There's something.
They are literally dinosaurs. A parakeet, a penguin is just as much a dinosaur as a stegosaurus or a T-Rex.
Yeah, and it's amazing that we've gotten there. Now we look at just the way like feathers, and of course, you discovered one of the most famous discoveries, the Dreadnoughtus. Now that was found in Patagonia. I haven't vacationed there yet, and it's one of the most complete dinosaur skeletons ever discovered. 85 feet long.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, how can you take us through that? What was that like? What was that day like? I mean, you couldn't anticipate that you were going to change the way we see dinosaurs.
Well, I went down there specifically to prospect for giant dinosaur bones. I had a feeling. Right. And so, you know, the formula that we use is all paleontologists use this method. Basically, you find rocks of the right age, depending on what you are interested in. They have to be sedimentary rocks so that a fossil could form. And then today you need exposure of those rocks. So that usually means we're working in deserts or badlands where you get good rates of erosion that are always exposing new bones.
Okay.
So you find those three things and you get yourself on the ground and you just walk. And if you're in the right circumstance, you usually find bones or fragments of bones pretty commonly. And then it's a question of, are you going to find something that's worth studying, that's in good shape, that's interesting to science? And in 2004, I went down there on my first expedition. This is southernmost Patagonia, down near Tierra del Fuego in Argentina. And we found a huge, huge femur, the thigh bone. It was 7 feet 1 inch long, or 2.2 meters. And this is one of the biggest femora that's ever been seen. We dug and dug and dug around that area, and that bone was isolated. But it made us super hungry to come back for more. And we come back the next field season in 2005, and on the first day out of my tent, I discover another giant femur, almost that size, but this time it wasn't isolated. And by the end of the first day, we had the tibia and fibula exposed. We had about 6 back vertebrae exposed. And I knew then that we had something really special. And then 4 years later, we had excavated the 145th giant bone of what later became Dreadnoughtus.
Now, when you first discovered that bone, did you have an idea like, oh, this has to be Brachiosaurus, or this is the? Was there an idea? Were you thinking you just discovered a completely different species?
I could tell right away that it was in this group of giant plant eaters called the titanosaurs. So I knew we had a titanosaur, and I was almost certain that it would be a new genus and species just because of our location. Nobody had really worked in that part of the world before, so it was highly likely that it was. I couldn't say that for sure until about 5 years later when we got the bones into my lab and were able to measure them and study them properly. But I had a very good hunch that we had just found a new species.
So take us back from that time, that awesome discovery, to your first discovery. What was that like? Was it something that happened right away, or was it a lot of searches when your first time you got out into the field, and did it happen overnight?
My first big expedition this is my first year as a professor, and I had gone with some colleagues from University of Pennsylvania, and we went to the Bahariya Oasis of Egypt. Which is really nowhere. It's about halfway between the Nile and Libya and halfway between the Mediterranean and Sudan. So it's way, way out there in the middle of nothing. We went there to find the fabled lost dinosaurs of Egypt. There were 4 species of dinosaurs found about 100 years before by a German paleontologist named Ernst Stromer von Reichenbach.
They have the best names.
It's a hell of a name, huh?
Yeah.
He found 4 species, including the very famous Spinosaurus. This is where Spinosaurus is discovered. He eventually gets them to the Bavarian Museum of Paleontology in Munich, and they are on display for decades until April of 1944, when they're bombed by an Allied bombing raid and destroyed, and they become known as the lost dinosaurs of Egypt. And for decades, paleontologists tried to get back. They would write letters. The Egyptians wouldn't respond. In the 80s, they would fax. In the 90s, they would email, and nobody ever responded. And this group of ours, we got funding from a film company to go find these lost dinosaurs. We couldn't get a response either, so we figured, what the hell, let's just go. So we go to Cairo, we find the head dude's office, and we sit in his lobby for 4 days while he goes back and forth, completely ignoring us, and we smile politely, and we drink tea, and then finally he stopped and signed our permits to get us the hell out of his office.
Out of your office. Perseverance, kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we end up in the Bahari Oasis. I had worked with Ernst Stromer's family. They gave me access to his diaries. I found the Spinosaurus quarry, and it had 100-year-old German newsprint. It had sardine cans. It had burlap and plaster. Things don't rot in the Sahara Desert. But he didn't leave a single bone behind. But in the course of looking elsewhere in that desert oasis, we discovered a new species of dinosaur. I gave it the name Paralititan, which means tidal giant, because it, like Spinosaurus, was living in this ancient tidal mangrove on the southern shore of what was then the Tethys Seaway. And at the time, Paralititan was the second largest dinosaur known.
So the Spinosaurus, I think, is an interesting thing because it has changed so much. I think more so than any other dinosaur. In the very beginning, I remember in the beginning it was kind of like a stand-up, with a sail, and then it was this big monster that walked, and then more recently now they're saying, well, we think it was more. It's been more. First they thought it was like a heron where it kind of stood in there, and then some people thought it was more like a crocodile to some extent, but that has changed, morphed so much into, and I think that's kind of a sign of the times to where it's not a big fight anymore when new information where someone's like, nope, I know this is how it is. You can't tell me that. And it seems to be more open. Have you, with more discoveries, you get more information. Is the technology also helping to where we're able to get such remarkable results from finding stuff that before we weren't able to?
To some degree, in the field, paleontology really hasn't been changed by technology.
It's just that
boots
tedious
on the ground, eyes on the rocks. But in the laboratory now, there's a lot that's different. For example, if things are preserved in a certain way, you can get isotopic information from teeth, and that gives you dietary information as well. We are able now to routinely demineralize dinosaur bones and recover their proteins, see their blood vessels, maybe even their blood cells. That's contentious. And I'm hoping that we get to the point where there is some hereditary information in proteins. It's not as rich as DNA, which we have not recovered from dinosaurs. But I'm hoping we get to the point where we can sequence proteins, mostly collagen, from dinosaurs and start to create family trees from them. If we do that, that'll give us a completely independent way of looking at their relatedness versus what the bones say, right? And if the bones and the proteins are saying the same thing, then that would give us a lot of confidence that we've got this right.
And that's but I do see a lot of confidence in terms like the discoveries. There's so much information out there, but it seems to where you guys are able to almost predict, like with Spinosaurus, their environment, like mangroves and based off bone structure and stuff like that. But the skin and the feathers and stuff seems to be a tougher. Like just recently, now you're seeing because there's the quill marks on the bones for a lot of dinosaurs and stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that help when you're seeing like, well, we see quills on these bones, which seems to be more in the bipedal ones opposed to the big dinosaurs? You don't see a lot of feathers on, or at least not yet, on the giants, on the titans. Do you think that's just because it hasn't been discovered? Is it different, or were they just so their past just went so far? Because you would think with the weather, feathers was what insulated you. So the big ones, were they just too big to be cold?
I think there are a lot of different preservational biases in the fossil record. And so to preserve something really delicate like a feather, you need fine grain resolution. Think of the size of the sedimentary particles as like the pixels on your computer screen.
Okay.
So more of them gives you a better picture. So to preserve a feather, you need silt and clay trickling down in something like a quiet, deep lake, right? That'll preserve that delicate feather. If you're trying to preserve the skeleton of, say, a T-Rex, you're not going to do it with silt and clay that trickles down, right? It's going to rot away before that would happen. So to preserve a big skeleton like a Dreadnoughtus or a T-Rex, it's got to be covered quickly with sand, right? And that's maybe a migrating inlet or a sand dune or a river flood, which is exactly the opposite of the conditions that you need to preserve something like a feather. So even if,
let's just for arguments, you may well have found a T-Rex feather, but you would have no way of connecting it to an actual T-Rex because one would be out the other. But with when you get in the lab, would be your best shot to be like, hey, this has a lot of the same properties as this.
Right. You might find a T-Rex feather and you wouldn't know that it was from a T-Rex, or you might find a T-Rex and the feathers might not be preserved.
Now, do you theorize that most dinosaurs were feathered?
There's a good shot at that now, right? Or feathers, or something we call them in tegmentary structure. So it might be quills, might be little fuzz or feathers. Certainly the group of meat eaters, the theropods, they were probably all feathered to some degree, or had ancestors that were feathered and lost their feathers. That can happen too.
Right, because that to me seems to be the biggest switch to where birds are in fact card-carrying members of the family.
Yeah,
I think that was the biggest thing. And we're seeing with and of course you deal with a lot with the mass extinction, and you also using a lot of 3D imaging. Mm-hmm. I always thought there's always going to be arguments or pushbacks or different theories or whatever, but the asteroid is the definitive, what we all I'm not a scientist, but in the scientific community, it is considered that is the closest thing to what actually happened.
If I could haul that asteroid into court, I could convict it.
Okay.
For sure, of mass murder.
Yeah, and And Earth is kind of doesn't like life to begin with, because we've had what, 5 or 6 mass extinctions.
We've had 5, and unfortunately, we are propagating the 6th mass
Yes.
extinction right now.
So with T-Rex, when the 3D, you also can be able to get them. You kind of hypothesize how fast they moved and stuff like that. Now, the gravity was a little bit different back then.
Roughly the same. I mean,
Roughly, okay, because that's one of the things. They're like, well, they were bigger because the atmosphere was different, and
there was a little bit more oxygen in the atmosphere then, but not a lot. And gravity would be about the same. Gravity can change a little bit depending on your distance from the center of the Earth. Like if you're on top of a mountain, you have a little less gravity. So it depends on the height of the continents, but you would not feel that effect. It's a very, very minor effect. And the atmosphere had a little more oxygen. It was a little warmer, a little more humid, but like we would be relatively comfortable in the time of the dinosaurs. You can go back earlier, like if you go back to the Devonian period, which is about 300 million years ago, oxygen's only about 16% of the atmosphere then. That's like you're borderline wanting to pass out at that point. And you go back further, you need a spacesuit to visit those Earths.
And that's incredible when you think about it.
Yeah.
So why were they so big? Why would they you would think, because now we don't see that. We have large animals. I mean, we have the blue whale, but you don't see a lot that size in, especially predators and stuff like that, like you did during that period. Was that just because of the environment, or they were just that successful? Because that's a lot of protein.
It is. There have been very, very big mammals. Nothing that approaches the size of like the giant sauropod dinosaurs. But about 28 million years ago, we had Paraceratherium, which is a hornless rhinoceros.
Oh, yeah.
That was 20 feet tall. It was huge, and of course all the Pleistocene megafauna that disappears as soon as we show up.
Yeah.
Also huge. But with dinosaurs, they kind of have an ecological way of being different than what us mammals do. So in mammals, the size of the offspring scales with adult body size.
Right, because you got to give birth.
Yeah, so like, we give birth to pretty big babies. An elephant will have a baby that's 300 pounds. A blue whale that will have a baby that's 3,000 pounds. Dinosaurs don't do that because they're in eggs. And eggs can only get so big because the egg has to exchange gases with the atmosphere. So no point in the egg can be too far from the air. So the biggest dinosaur, Dreadnoughtus, starts out as a tiny little creature, right? They start out like smaller than a house cat, probably. That means that something like a Dreadnoughtus is doing tiny little like rabbit things in the ecosystem when it's born. And then it's doing maybe sheep things, and then horse things, and then herd of horse things, and then giant dinosaur things. So this one species is capturing a whole column of resources from the ecosystem, whereas with mammals, that's all divided up between different species.
Right.
So
niches.
that growth strategy, the niches, I think was one of the keys to the dinosaurian success, is that you have this one species that's able to capture so much energy from the same ecosystem.
And outgrow the competition.
There was clearly an arms race, right, going on. Now, not all dinosaurs got huge. There were plenty of tiny little dinosaurs, but you see like this arms race between the big predators and the big plant eaters, and that's that relationship, that predator-prey relationship, has to have something to do with that.
Because it's like the ultra dinosaurs, they start out so small and they're so giant, and you're trying to think. Traditionally, you see, a lot of dinosaurs had nesting grounds. I think the predator ones kind of paired up like eagles do today. I mean, those giant dinosaurs were so huge, and their eggs were so. I mean, I see one of the theories was that they just kind of laid them and left, and then they laid them in certain nesting grounds, but they weren't present, and that was obviously you can't be that big, but then moving around something so small. Like how would they even notice they're young at that size? Like that's the thing that blew my mind, because they're so giant.
So I think almost certainly both of those strategies existed. You see this in birds today. So you'll see, when a baby robin is born, it's all floopy. It can't really do anything for itself. Those are called altricial birds. They're helpless, and they need parental care. Or when a baby sandpiper is born, they hatch and boom, they go.
Yeah, like a duck.
Right, and they're called precocial. And I'm sure that the non-avian dinosaurs, the regular dinosaurs, also employed both of those strategies, different strategies for different species. We have evidence of some altricial hadrosaur dinosaurs from a place in Montana, and we can see that these hatchling hadrosaurs are born very helpless, right? And so they were obviously getting some kind of care. And then other dinosaur hatchlings little sauropods are probably, they hatch and they're probably ready to start foraging right away.
So you think the big ones were kind of more like sea turtles, where they would just kind of pit,
that's
their eggs, cover them
right.
up, and just kind of.
That's a good strategy for creatures like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I'm always fascinated by it because they keep seeing more and more things, and of course, if you see birds today, you see those same things.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe the ostrich is probably the best. Where it's just where the male takes care of it and the females lay the eggs. And so do you think when it came to like T-Rex and stuff, do you think it was pairing, or do you think it was like a thing where
I don't think we know that for T-Rex.
It's just too hard to.
I don't think we.
Well,
have
we
any
just found out
evidence
that there's two different species. Also, like we assumed that the smaller ones were juveniles, and then there's that information is that it was a completely different.
There was another called Nanotyrannus,
yes,
right, which is a smaller species. Very easy to believe, right? It's, if you are geographically separated, you're just going to start to go down your own genetic pathway, and eventually you become a different species.
Has that been the most fascinating thing for you, to see how diverse and how evolution just kind of just created? Because you look at it and you see what we have now, and you see they had it's like a replacement. You hate the word extinction, but it just seems like Mother Nature is just set in a way to where one fails, another one kind of steps in, and the arms race, as they call it. It's amazing, the finished product, how similar, but yet how uniquely different.
Yeah, it's convergent evolution, right? And so unrelated or little related organisms will take on the same characteristics, maybe the same shape or the same behaviors, if they're trying to achieve the same thing in the environment, right? And so you look at it like at dolphins and fish, right?
Yep.
Dolphins are mammals.
Yep.
They're not that closely related to the other fish, but they have the same body shape because they're under the same selection pressure, right? And so you see this over and over. And then, as you mentioned, there's been 5 mass extinctions in Earth history. Every time the playing field is cleared, the survivors begin what we call a radiation, right? A very quick series of evolutionary adaptations, and they radiate out and take up all those unfilled niches, like those unfilled job descriptions now. And so the dinosaurs get wiped out, and pretty soon the mammals rise, and pretty soon, we have proto-primates appear, and we have big herd mammals appear, and big predatory mammals, and some of them return to the sea because the mosasaurs aren't in the ocean anymore. And so very quickly, all those dinosaur jobs now are taken over by the mammals.
What's your favorite species to discover?
That I discovered?
No, that you discovered. What is your golden albatross? Like, I want in my time.
Well, I'd like to know a lot more about what's going on in Antarctica. I think that's the most fascinating thing, because Antarctica during the Cretaceous period, it was rainforest. Yeah. And so it's a boreal polar forest. Antarctica is already at the South Pole, so it gets 6 months of darkness, but there's a forest there. And we don't have a modern analog for that environment. So what's going on in that dark polar forest for half the year? So I imagine some creatures are staying, right? Some maybe get by on meager rations. Some maybe are hibernating, and some are probably migrating out of there. I have a suspicion that Dreadnoughtus, which I found at the bottom of South America, is actually an Antarctic species, because there wouldn't have been enough land. There was a seaway that cut off the bottom of South America, and that little land left over is not enough for a breeding population of 65-ton Dreadnoughtus. The only way I'm ever going to be able to show that is if I can find Dreadnoughtus fossils in Australia. Because Australia, if you look at that big sweeping curve...
Because again, this is when there was Patagonia, so everything was connected.
Yeah, so Australia is connected to Antarctica. The Drake Passage hadn't opened that separates Antarctica and South America. So that's all one landmass. Obviously, I'm not going to find the fossils today in Antarctica, but if I could, anything you can find in Australia and in Patagonia was an Antarctic species.
And you think with the land being so frozen, you would have maybe better preserved fossils, possibly?
That doesn't really affect
I guess
the fossils.
that'd be like, it would have to be. I mean, you're talking millions of years before it changed. Weather changed or whatever.
Yeah.
Digging obviously is going to be a lot more challenging.
People do it, but there's very little paleontology happening in Antarctica because there's just not a lot of exposure, right? Mostly it happens on Vega Island and the Antarctic Peninsula, but there's very little exposed rock today in Antarctica.
What would that? Now I watch a lot of Oak Island, so I always thinking, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but those guys, they're digging for treasure, but you see them, dusting for the artifacts and stuff like that. But they use a lot of high tech equipment, these super drills and cranes and stuff because it would be a massive taking to start doing research in Antarctica. Plus, I know it's a little bit warmer than it used to be there, but still. Exposure wise, you don't have a whole lot of time. You can't make a whole lot of mistakes out there.
You can't.
I've interviewed a couple guys who were out. One guy was out in the base for 6 months, and he said, with the exception of seeing an occasional penguin, like there was pretty much nothing out there. And he read all the books, but he was like, for what his work is, he only had about an hour a day to actually go out and do what he needed to do. So it was very it was just. He said it was mind-boggling just to have a conversation with a human being because it's just so isolated out there.
Yeah, the only macrofauna on the whole continent is the emperor penguin. And that's it. Yeah,
but there's there is a treasure chest trove. I think a lot of, also because it's untouched. I think we didn't have a lot of civilization digging around in there and stuff like that. So the things you find there would be a real accurate depiction in terms of not being moved around, or you could see a lot of species how they lived at that time, more so than anywhere else, I would think.
Yeah, almost anything you would find in Antarctica is going to be new to science, and so that makes it really exciting. There's a really cool discovery on the southern coast of Australia. It's a tiny little plant-eating dinosaur called Leonosaurus, and it has a very small skull, but about 2/3 of its skull are its eye orbits. And so that makes you think that it was adapted to low light conditions, like a bush baby today, the little primates. So that's probably a dinosaur that's hanging out in this dark polar forest during the winter. And then others, like maybe Dreadnoughtus, are migrating out of there.
So that's absolutely amazing. I hate, one of the things whenever you get the story of dinosaurs, and now we have, it's almost like watching like nature specials now, with the graphics is really cool.
Yeah.
I always hate that it always ends with everything getting blown up. Like, can't we just have a period of time where they were successful and thriving and leave the imagination? That's the one thing I hate is always every great dinosaur documentary ends with the doomsday. And I feel like sometimes that misinterprets their success.
I agree. And, I always wish, when I'm watching the Harry Potter movies or the Star Wars movies, like that first scene where everything is good and you just I wish that was the whole movie. I would watch that movie.
They were successful for hundreds of millions of years. We don't have to do curtain call.
Yeah, they were. And so, they were the most successful group of land animals ever, right? They dominated Earth's terrestrial ecosystem for 165 million years. They'd still be here today if it wasn't for that cosmic accident, right? If you go back 66 million years ago, the day before the asteroid hit, you'd look around and you'd think, well, this is how it's always going to be. These dinosaurs are always going to be here. And then the next day, I think they're functionally extinct. Right. But if it weren't for that, they'd still be here. And we'd still be these little shrew-like mammals living in the hidden and forgotten recesses of the dinosaur world, hoping never to be noticed. And, that's the way it had been.
Isn't that
so
amazing
long.
How one tragedy leads to a complete new dominant species, and it is connected, even, and it's funny how this life always finds a way, and you kind of wonder, when our time's up, who will be next, and everyone always says the cockroach, but I got a feeling it might be squirrels. I got a feeling like they've been watching us for a long time.
They're pretty tough.
They're not too far off from having a thumb, but they're
pretty smart.
And they are smart. What is one of the talks that I wanted to ask you about? There was this huge debate, maybe it was 2 years ago, where they were trying to determine how fast a T-Rex ran. Mm-hmm. That was the thing. And it was everything, because in Jurassic Park, it could, 30, 45 miles an hour, I think, could chase the car. raptors were cheetah speed. And then people were like, no. They moved like you could walk away from them. They were that slow. And then they were trying to say they were basically giant vultures, that they kind of scavenged, that they were too cumbersome. There was all these things. Where do you sit on that?
I would not try to outrun a T-Rex.
No, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah, no. You can, as a rule of thumb, if you look at the hip height and the stride length of an organism, you can see how fast they're going. And T-Rex, probably for short distances, probably like Usain Bolt territory. You know?
Well, because also their bones are lighter. Even though they are larger, they still have the bird-like bones, so it's not. They don't have they're not going to be as heavy as, say, as an elephant. Mm-mm. Comparable to size, right, in terms of that. So yeah, and they I think they got to be quick when you're dealing with an 85-foot, 65-ton. I don't think you can slow rise him and slowly walk him down. You have to be extremely quick to be able to compete against these giants, because there's a reason why the herbivores were getting as big as they could. Yeah. Because they weren't outrunning it.
So now I can give you a strategy if you're ever on the Isla Nublar being chased by a T-Rex.
Yeah, if that ever happens.
Yes. So imagine, you could probably do this, but if you put a telephone pole across the back of your shoulders, how easy would it be to turn?
It would not be.
It'd be really hard, right? Because you have all that momentum out far away. So think of a T-Rex, right? It's very long, has a very long tail. Probably not a great turner.
Right. Oh, it's okay.
Sorry, wrecking the joint. It's going to be fast, but it's probably not going to be a fast turner. So if you're being chased by a T-Rex, you want to zigzag. You want to run out and run the post pattern down there, right?
Yeah, I just obviously with this size, hopefully I would see him. I wouldn't be there anyways. I would just give him it. That'd be his thing. But it is fascinating to see people discussing, like, that's one thing about my podcast, and I was like, with being at Fox, everybody, politics, and I'm like, one of the things we're missing is inspiring youth, and politics is depressing. Honestly, it really is, and I guess one of the nice things for you is when your politics out there is rock and hammer, and you're out there, you're away from it all. How nice is it to just be able to go and do your craft, and you don't have a lot of the outside noise that we have to deal with today?
Well, nothing gives you a perspective like geology and paleontology. And, all the things we fight about today seem so irrelevant when you look at, this deep swing of history. If you took the 4.5 billion year history and condensed it into a 1,000-page book, our species, Homo sapiens, appears 300,000 years ago. That's the start of the last line of the book. Yeah. And our entire 10,000-year civilization would be the last 5-letter word of that book. So if I gave you a 1,000-page book and said, just read the last word and tell me what the story's about, you wouldn't have a very good idea, would you?
No, you would not. You would not. But we have 1,000 pages of what's going on with these guys. Now, the Dreadnoughtus, when it was finally complete and you got a good image of what it was like, mm-hmm. How was that for you? Like, like this, that's an amazing thing to discover, but like, that is, like, I found that, like, how was that?
It was amazing. I can tell you
there's no award that's going to be better than that. I just can't imagine.
It's true. The most sublime, sanguine moment of my entire field career is at the point where we have Dreadnoughtus maximally exposed in the ground, right? So you can really see the skeleton. And there was this aperiodic comet called Comet McNaught that appeared in the sky. You could only see it in the southern hemisphere. We didn't know it was coming because we're out in the field. We're not getting any news or anything, but we see this little fuzzy blip in the sky, and then the next night it's moved, it's a little bigger, and then after a few days it's got this giant tail, like this naked eye comet. And there was one evening where we had finished excavating. I had sent the grad students down to camp, and they're collecting firewood and getting dinner started. And I stay behind. I'm sitting on a rock looking at one of the world's largest dinosaur skeletons and this giant comet hanging overhead, sipping a little Jameson's whiskey. And like, it just doesn't get any better than that.
You're just living in the moment.
It was amazing.
And of course, there's no one there taking a selfie of that.
No.
But I think especially today with media and tablets and so much stuff that keep people like this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great adventure. Like even if a family was just want to try something different, because it's camping, it's out, you're learning stuff, you're moving around, it's the unknown. Who knows? I mean, as a child's mind goes, I can remember going to, I think it was it Disney or Six Flags? They had a little fossil little area, and all the kids were digging.
Mm-hmm.
Like that inspires generations. Do you see an uptick in young people coming, wanting to? Is it because certain things have kind of withered out with technology? Everybody wants to be in front of the computer, but do you see an uptick with young people interested in the field, or is it something to where you're concerned, or where there's a lack of interest?
What I know is that kids love the authentic hands-on experience, right? And so I'm the executive director of the Edelman Fossil Park and Museum, and it's an active fossil quarry in southern New Jersey. It's about a half hour from Philadelphia, and we're just a year old now. We just built this gorgeous 45,000 square foot museum with really beautiful exhibits. And we have a research layer there that we manage and curate very carefully. But above that, we have layers where the public can collect fossils for themselves. And every kid, every grown-up that goes to this site, and I hope you do someday.
Oh, yeah, Harry. It's not that far. There's no excuse. We have the budget.
Take the train to Philly, and it's a 20-minute Uber from there.
Oh, nice. And can we get pictures that we can put up while we're talking about
it?
So people can see it?
We'll
because
give you all kinds of pictures.
Awesome.
So what we see there is these, every kid that goes there who's not afraid to get their hands dirty, who tries a little bit, finds a 66 million year old fossil with their own hands, and they get to take it home. And now they have literally seen something that no human has ever seen before. They know a little bit of information that no human has ever known before. We have a word for people that see things first and know things first. They're called explorers, right?
Yeah.
And these kids become authentic explorers, and that's addictive. And then you want to know what's over there and what's over there and what's over that hill and what's on that continent and what's on that planet. And that's how it can start with a kid and a pair of muddy hands, And so many scientists, so many engineers have an origin story that starts with an authentic hands-on experience and or with a museum, right? And so, the thing that really excites me about this project, the reason I'm doing it, is because museums persist for more than decades, hundreds of years.
Yep.
This museum might be here in a couple hundred years, and imagine all the good that something like that can do, long after they've forgotten our names, but a couple hundred years from now, it'll still be doing good in the world, and that really excites me.
And at the same time, you're inspiring a new generation.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to bring my kids to it. They love to go out and especially my daughter, I call her my snake wrangler because it doesn't matter what the animal is, she's going to go get it.
That's great.
And she likes to look for it when we're at the beach. She wants to identify each seashell, and it starts, you see it start there, and you see the little, and like, oh, this one's a clam, this is always, and then there's this one might be ancient, and you're like, well, we don't know. We have to keep looking, and you see their little, and I think that's one of the things in discovery that is kind of in our DNA, and to focus on that. More people should do that, and you don't have to be a kid to be inspired or to have fun.
No.
I mean, it's just I think it needs to be something, and then there's great places like Montana's a hotbed. Mm-hmm. Where would you, if you were a novice and you wanted to go to besides like not just the museum, which you should definitely check out, and we'll put that information up on the screen, but like if you were going to tour America, like if you and your family were like, hey, we're going to go to some sites and do some fossiling this summer, instead of sitting in a beach at a hotel, where would the hotbeds be? I always think of Montana, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, on the East Coast,
New Jersey.
It's the Edelman Fossil Park and Museum. If you want to go out west, go to Dinosaur National Monument. Is amazing, right, in Utah, and they have a huge Jurassic bone bed there, and they very smartly didn't excavate all the bones. They left it in place. They just uncovered it enough for you to see the bones, and it's at like a 45-degree angle, and they put a building on top of it, and so you can go in this building and see this dinosaur deathbed there, which is really cool. La Brea Tar Pits is
I went there several times.
Actually, I think it's closed now for renovation for a couple of years, but amazing stuff there. The fluorescent fossil site out west is another good spot. Petrified National Forest, you can see some cool Triassic fossils there. So there's lots of places. There's in Kemmerer, Wyoming, which is a very tiny little town. That's where J.C. Penney started, by the way.
Oh, wow.
You can dig your own fossil fish there. You've probably seen them. I mean, they have so many fossil fish.
Growing up in
there.
California, every time we went up into we called it the Wash or Mount Wilson or in Mammoth, they would always be looking through rock beds in the rivers and stuff. You would always find little things, a lot of little troglodytes, and you'd see like on the rock, you'd see an imprint of a fish skeleton, or I can remember I collected so many of them one summer, and I it's in a box somewhere. But because I had enough clamshells where I could have started
Those clams that you were collecting are probably California has experienced a lot of tectonic uplift.
Yep.
So a reef or a shell bed will form, and then it gets uplifted.
Ends up on the top of a mountain, basically.
Yeah, and it happens unevenly, so it forms terraces, almost like steps.
So we're somewhere in a step because it wasn't like we dug 8 feet. It wasn't that deep.
Yeah.
I mean, I will maybe 3, if I might even give myself, I don't know if we had the attention span to go 3 feet deep, but it was relatively quick. But I just remember that it just opened the floodgates in terms of imagination. Show and tell that week, I was the man.
Yeah.
Because I came in with and I think I said, this is millions and billions of, because you don't really, but then you want to research everything and you're going into the library and it just kind of opens your mind to so many, it's like you start your own expedition, and I was, which led to me with my, after that, I was fascinated with fish. And I to this day, I still have giant fish tanks in my house. Like it's just kind of grows and inspires. And I think this is something that we need to get more attention on because it just leads to so many positive things in terms of not just your imagination, but your mathematics, geography. You learn about the country. You learn about the things you walk on, places you go, environments. So it's like it's the science clash that you didn't expect. And it also turns into other things. You might not end up being a scientist, but you will end up with a really strong appreciation for the environment, I think.
That's right. And, one of the things that I worry about is that, kids, and I have a son, they spend too much time on their screens.
Yep.
They don't get outside enough. And so what we try to do at the Edelman Fossil Park is to really connect people to nature. So we've got a really cool free paleontology playground. We've got a couple miles of nature trails. We've got really nice gardens. And our basic thesis is that people love what they know and people protect what they love, right? And so we're trying to help people fall in love with this amazing, wondrous, beautiful planet that we are so fortunate to occupy. And once they're in love with it, with the hope that maybe then they will work together to try to help save this planet of ours.
What do you think in terms of when I was coming up we conserved cans and plastic? That was recycling was a thing, and our big thing was save the whales. I remember that was everything. There was that when
and that worked, by the way.
It did work very well. It did, and when I think about today, because everything is so politicized, when you want because saving the environment shouldn't be an argument.
No.
And it doesn't mean you have to agree with whatever one side is saying, the other side. Simple things. Pick up your trash. Respect Mother Nature when you see it. Instead of ripping a flower out of the ground, take a picture of it. When you go out in the thing, when you see animals, respect them and understand them. And then I think that message still resonates regardless of where you politically sit on global warming and all that other kind of stuff, because our kids don't need to get caught up in that. I think just being a shepherd for your environment, I don't think is a political thing.
Well, I like to go back to that Apollo 8, Bill Anders, when he was circling the far side of the moon, took the iconic Earthrise image, right?
Right.
And it showed our planet, and it showed humanity really for the first time, our situation in the universe, right? And so we live on this tiny little lonely lifeboat in space, right? This little rocky lifeboat in space. And that's truly our situation. Imagine if you and 4 or 5 other people were on a little life raft in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Like, how much would you attend to that life raft? How closely would you monitor it? How quick would you be to repair it? How much would you love that little lifeboat?
It
right?
would be everything.
That's everything. It's exactly our situation. We're part of this world. We need this world. And, I can give you 2 simple things that people can do right now.
Yeah.
And so, we have a climate crisis. We have a biodiversity crisis. And they're both dire. It's not political. We know these things are happening.
Yeah, we're down to
right?
30% of like actual wild land.
We have
And birds and chickens and I think it's chickens and chickens is the biggest, like triple the population of actual birds in the like it's unbelievable when you look at some of the numbers.
I'll give you a couple scary statistics. So in terms of the biomass of mammals on Earth, so literally get all the mammals and put them on a scale and see what they weigh. Humans and our animals are now 96% of the biomass of mammals on Earth. All the wild mammals on the land are 2%. All the marine mammals are 2%.
Yep.
If you go back a century or a little more ago, those ratios are flipped. According to the World Wildlife Fund, since 1970, not in terms of species, but population, since 1970, we've lost 73% of wildlife on Earth. 73%. Like, how's that not on the front page of every newspaper every day?
Yeah, and
right?
and then there's always an argument. Well, it's population explosion in the human population, and you run into that fine line of when you talk about preservation. Sometimes there's some cold hard facts that we just don't want to acknowledge. It's like the current rate, the way we consume things, the way we, while we rip forests up, and I think one of the saddest things I saw was one lone orangutan is sitting on the tree.
It's such a sad image.
And there's nothing left. It's just he's not leaving his one tree.
Yeah.
And it's being replaced by the olive oil,
the date palms.
Yeah,
we actually have that image on the wall of the museum of the sad orangutan sitting there.
And it really makes you like we have to be better than that.
Yeah. So 2 things that you can do. One is super easy. It's called rewilding your yard. If you're a homeowner, if you have a yard, right now in the United States, the largest single crop is turf grass. And the largest irrigated crop, the largest user of water is turf grass. And it produces exactly 0 food, right?
Right, yeah.
It doesn't do anything.
It's basically makeup.
So if everybody took about half their yard and rewilded that, and that can be as simple as mow it once a year. That's all you have to do. And then that provides habitat for butterflies and fireflies and caterpillars, and then all the grubs that the birds eat, right? Things like that. If everybody did that, it would be the equivalent of adding 20 million acres of new national park to this country. It'd be like adding 9 Yellowstone national parks if everybody took half their yard and just rewilded it. And all it means is you just mow it less, right? And leave the leaves in the fall, because that's all the carbon that your soil needs. And there's lots of butterflies and things that have their eggs underneath of it. Right. So you can actually do good by being lazy. Just spend a little less time there doing those things.
Maybe some of the homeowners associations should chill out.
They should. And, stop poisoning your yard. Like, the glyphosate is a known carcinogen. And, what's so bad about a dandelion anyway,
Yeah, they're actually delicious.
You can eat every single part of a dandelion. Plus, you're not going to win that battle. I once I summited the Andes, and I bestraddled the divide. I got 1 foot in Argentina, 1 foot in Chile, wind-swept, barren place with rocks and glaciers, and there's a dandelion. Like, you're not going to beat the dandelion.
No,
So,
and I remember we used to chew on the stems because they were sour.
Yeah.
And it was a lot cheaper and you didn't get cavities from Jolly Ranchers would get you, but I just remember as a kid we'd be like, oh, and now if my kids went to grab something in the yard, I'd be like, hey, don't do that, and it's
because you don't know what's on it.
Yeah. I was like, we need to get back to the garden hose and things like that.
But everything that has a flower is food for something.
Yes.
Right. So it's food for butterflies. It's food for, certain beetles. And then those are food for other things. Those are food for birds. And, who doesn't like birds? And so if we just treated our lawns a little more gently, it would make a huge difference. And the other thing you can do is every state in the union has some portion of the power grid that comes from renewables. Where I live in New Jersey, it's about 43%. So anything that's electric in New Jersey gets roughly 43% of its energy from renewables. So, if you're building a home, or if it's time to replace your water heater or your furnace, replace it with electrical appliances like heat pumps, which work great. You see them all over Maine, like they work fine when it's cold. Replace it with heat pumps, electrify your home as much as possible. And then as the grid gets greener, your house gets greener. Right now in New Jersey, the Energy Master Plan has us going to 100% renewables by 2050. If that actually happens and your home is electric, now you have a carbon net zero home. Now you have a greenhouse.
And people don't realize New Jersey is beautiful.
Yeah, New
like,
Jersey's wonderful.
You get caught up in the cities. And I lived there on a farm for about a year last year. And I could not, the biodiversity was just, when they got the green state, the farm was amazing. And it was one of those things where they just kind of let it grow. So it was all kind of, but I mean, deer, squirrels, chipmunks, blue jays. I mean, and I couldn't put up enough seeds out in the yard, and one of the things was we just kind of let it be.
They call Cape May, New Jersey, the Grand Canyon of birding. Like if you're a serious birder, you're going to New Jersey because so many migratory birds come through there. The pine barrens of New Jersey are just a natural marvel. I'm out there all the time hiking, and it's about a third of New Jersey that is preserved as pine lands. And it's this beautiful, pristine forest. It's a unique ecosystem. There are species that live only there. And, it's just a great place to visit.
It really is. And like I said, definitely need to check out that museum. And we're going to put information up there. And I know that I'm going to have to plan a trip.
Yeah.
Because I got some junior paleontologists in my house. So, and it just be a fun experience. And again, it's one of those things we need to get outside. He gave us really two simple, shocking. All you got to do is not cut your lawn so much. Pretty simple thing. First time I'm hearing it.
There's
and I consider myself a pretty versed guy.
There's a new app and website that is launching today, actually. It's called Less Lawn, More Life.
Less Lawn, More Life. And that's an app I'm going to check out.
And they will give you pointers on how to do this, on how to rewild a portion of your yard to make it more beautiful, more healthy, more biodiverse. And, we do this at the Edelman Fossil Park. We've planted tens of thousands of native species. And guess what? The birds have come back. The animals are coming back. I just saw a nesting pair of Baltimore Orioles. That's kind of rare, right? And so they're there. We have at least 20 pairs of nesting bluebirds right now on the property because this is their stuff. And we planted their stuff and they come for it.
And they will come.
Yeah.
They will come. And it's one of my favorite things to do is to sit. Was when I was in New Jersey. I'm in Florida now and do the same thing there, although it's the climate's a little different, but was just sitting in the yard. And if you sit there long enough and quiet enough, they come out, and eventually after a few months, I would just come to my chair and I had a chipmunk there, I had a squirrel there, deer's walking by, the birds would fly in. The blue jays would always start shit. Those little mimics, those little T-Rexes, they would mimic the sound of a hawk to make everybody fly so they could steal all the good stuff. But you get to see, you can become part of it if you just sit back and let it be.
Yeah.
And I think that's just kind of let it be. But, and thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
We're going to have to, would like to come back now that we're, the success of the show, we'll actually have a little budget. Would like to maybe come do the podcast at the museum and,
we'd love
experience that. That would be awesome.
We'd love to host you there.
Harry is my little junior architect. So thank you so much for coming on today. And,
my pleasure.
And congratulations on an amazing find.
And congrats on the show. I hear it's doing great.
Oh yeah, and it's an amazing thing because we're talking about this stuff.
Yeah,
and it really needs a voice. And like I said, if you are looking, you want to get them off inspire them. You can't just take it away. You gotta inspire something new.
That's right.
And I cannot. I'm telling you right now, at 53 years old. If I went there and I found a fossil, you couldn't tell me shit for a week. You know what I'm saying? I would be on the show. It would be on the net. Like, look, it would just, because there, and then the thing is like, hey, I discovered this, but maybe you could discover one of the largest dinosaurs that ever walked this earth. And then that in itself just sells itself.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen to you.
Hey, if it gets me out of this building, I'm with it. But again, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate your time. And, I hope you guys enjoyed this one because I sure did.
My pleasure. Thank you.